Oilseeds and products, annual country, Egypt, Post, Cairo report. Category, oilseeds and products. Prepared by, approved by, Jenny Morgan report. Highlights, FASG Cairo forecasts. Egypt's soybean imports in May 2026-27 up to 5.2 MMT due to higher feed demand from the poultry, livestock, and aquaculture industries, with the United States expected to maintain the bulk of this market share. Overall feed use of oilseed meals is also forecasted up, driven by demand from end users. Soybean oil, sunflower seed oil, and palm oil are expected to see higher volume growth during the forecast period, fueled by population growth and rising demand from the food processing industry. Narrative seeds. As the region's largest soybean importer and consumer, Egypt relies heavily on imports, especially for animal feed. Soybean imports are expected to continue increasing, driven by increased feed consumption in the poultry, dairy, and aquaculture sectors. FAS Cairo, Post, forecasts Egypt's soybean imports in marketing year, MY 2026-27, up to 5.2 million metric tons, MMT, with the United States forecast to maintain the majority of market share. Post attributes the increase in imports to an anticipated increase in the feed consumption rate. Sunflower seed imports and consumption are also forecast to increase due to an increase in demand for use in oil extraction and food. Post forecasts Egypt's soybean meal consumption to reach 4.2 MMT in May 2026-27, a 5% increase from the previous marketing year due to higher feed demand from the poultry, livestock, and aquaculture industries. Although corn is the primary ingredient in poultry feed, soybean meal is added for protein to optimize growth and production. With an expanding poultry sector, feed consumption is expected to increase accordingly. Sunflower seed meal production, consumption, and imports are forecast to remain stable, on account of lower demand in feed for large animals. Post forecasts Egypt's soybean, sunflower seed, and palm oil consumption at 2.57 MMT for May 2026-27, a modest increase over the previous marketing year driven by population growth and rising demand from the restaurant and food processing sectors. As Egypt is positioning itself as a regional hub for food manufacturing, it will continue to look to imports to source its raw materials. Meanwhile, soybean oil supply is expected to remain ample as Egypt continues to expand its domestic crushing capacity. In contrast, with no domestic production of palm oil, Egypt will remain fully dependent on imports to satisfy demand. Egypt does not impose import tariffs on soybeans, sunflower seeds, or crude palm oil. Duties on oilseed meal and cake are 5%. Duties on bulk crude and refined soybean and sunflower seed oil are 2%. Soybeans production, supply and demand statistics. My imports forecast at 5,200,000 metric tons for 2026-27. Crush forecast 5,200,000 metric tons. Ending stocks 532,000 metric tons. Official data. PSD Online Advanced Query. Post projects Egypt's soybean production for May 2026-27 will reach 85,000 metric tons, unchanged from last year. Persistent high costs, higher planting season temperatures, and farmer crop preferences constrain growth. Soybeans are grown May-August in Middle and Upper Egypt. ARC-approved varieties include Giza 21, 35, 25, 82, 83, and 111. Post estimates Egypt's soybean consumption for May 2026-27 will reach 5.2 million metric tons, driven by expanded crushing and higher imports. Crushing capacity is forecast to rise to 5.2 MMT, while domestic food use remains about 17 TMT. Post projects that Egypt will import 5.2 MMT of soybeans in May 2026-27, representing a 4% increase from last year's estimate, due to rising feed demand within the livestock sector. Additionally, Post raises its previous import estimate for May 2025-26 by nearly 25%, reflecting improved foreign exchange availability and higher soybean meal consumption among livestock producers. Dairy, poultry, and fish producers are critically reliant upon imports as its domestic soybean production is anticipated to cover only less than 2% of demand in my 2026 or 27. Between my 2021 and my 2025-26 OCT Egypt imported 20.8 MMT of soybeans, with main suppliers being the United States, 15.0 MMT, Ukraine, 257 MMT, and Brazil, 122 MT, and other origins at 2 MMT. Between my 2020-21 and my 2025-26, nearly 72.2% of Egypt's soybean imports came from the United States. U.S. soybeans are expected to maintain their dominant position in the Egyptian market, supported by competitive pricing, strong demand, and the superior quality of both soybean meal and oil produced from U.S. soybeans. Egyptian traders and processors prioritize sustainability and consistent quality in their supply, both of which are hallmarks of U.S.-origin soybeans. According to industry sources, soybean meal produced from U.S. beans is more uniform, contains less fiber, and has a higher protein content compared to meal from other sources. Posts forecast my 2026-27 soybean stocks up to 532 TMT, due to a forecasted increase in imports. Carrying stock levels are mainly held by private industry and private traders. Sunflower seeds production. Supply and demand statistics show production steady at 50 TMT, imports rising to 25 TMT, total supply 81 TMT, crush 60 TMT, total domestic consumption 70 TMT, and ending stocks 8 TMT. Official data can be accessed at PSD Online Advanced Query. Post projects Egypt's sunflower seed production for my 2026-27 to be 50 TMT, consistent with last year's estimate. Sunflower cultivation and output are expected to remain steady. Primary varieties in use are Saka 53 and Giza 102, yielding an average of 2.5 MT per hectare. Post anticipates Egypt's sunflower seed consumption to reach 70 TMT in my 2026-27, with food use up by 2 TMT. Sunflower seed imports are forecast at 25 TMT, with China the leading supplier. Post's forecast ending stocks at 8 TMT, mainly held by private traders. Post forecasts Egypt's soybean meal production in my 2026-27, October-September, at 411 MMT, representing a 4% increase over the previous marketing year. This growth is attributed to higher crushing activity, driven by increased soybean imports. For my 2025-26, Post revises its soybean meal production estimate up to 3.95 MMT from 3.15 MMT, reflecting the same underlying factors. Rising demand for feed, particularly from the poultry and livestock sectors, is expected to further boost the volume of imported soybeans used for crushing and meal production. Post forecasts Egypt's soybean meal consumption in my 2026-27 at 4.2 MMT, up by 5% from the previous marketing year, due to a projected pickup in feed demand by the poultry, large animal, and aquaculture sectors. Post is revising my 2025-26 soybean meal consumption up to 4 MMT from its earlier estimate of 3.3 MMT, due to an anticipated increase in the crushing of soybeans to meet the demand of the livestock sector. Poultry. Post anticipates poultry sector feed consumption to grow as large poultry feed companies, especially those with integrated operations including broilers, breeding stock, slaughterhouses, and hatcheries, have begun operating more efficiently. This efficiency stems from lower feed production costs driven by foreign exchange availability, which boosted imports for feed raw material imports. Some companies are now investing in new projects for chick production, broiler operations, and egg production. The government is also expanding license approvals for livestock, poultry, and fodder projects as part of its broader plan to increase domestic production of milk as well as red and white meat. During calendar year 2025, Egypt's poultry sector produced 1.6 billion broiler chickens through commercial operations and an additional 320 million chickens through rural production, covering 97% of domestic broiler demand. The sector also produced 16 billion table eggs, equivalent to 140 eggs per capita. This represents significant growth from pre-2023 levels, when the sector produced 1.4 billion birds and 14 billion eggs annually. Aquaculture. Egypt also leads Africa in aquaculture production, producing nearly 1.6 MMT of fish annually. Aquaculture accounts for roughly 80% of Egypt's total fish production, primarily through private farms. However, the sector faces several challenges: competition for water resources, limited awareness of fish disease management practices, and inadequate processing facilities. Major investments by both government and private companies in fish farming infrastructure, including advanced farms, hatcheries, and processing plants, create demand for specialized feeds that help fish grow faster and improve production. These drive continued development of feeds designed for different types of fish. Industry forecasts demand for aquaculture feed to exceed 2 MMT by 2032. Current annual fish feed demand ranges between 1.4 and 1.5 MMT. Major dietary energy sources in aquaculture feed include yellow corn, 20 to 25%, wheat bran, 20-30%, rice bran, 10 to 25%, and vegetable oils, 1 to 5%. Feed formulation depends on the protein and energy content requirements, ingredient availability and prices, and the specific fish species and sizes being raised. This feed mix formulation depends on the protein and energy contents of the feed as well as the availability and price of the ingredients, including fish species and their sizes. For more information on the aquaculture sector, see GAIN Report, Egyptian Aquaculture Industry, 2025 Update. Post forecasts: Egypt's soybean meal imports in May 2026-27 at 100 TMT, unchanged from the previous marketing year. Post revises May 2025-26 imports down by 20 TMT from the previous estimate, amid increased crush and meal production. Soybean meal exports to Egypt amounted to 874 TMT during the past 5 years. See Figure 2. Note: soybean meal imports surged in May 2022-23 as reduced foreign currency availability constrained soybean imports for crushing, leading to a decline in domestic meal production. Post forecast May 2026-27 soybean meal stocks at 360 TMT, unchanged from the previous marketing year. Soybean meal stock is held by private feed millers and private traders. Post forecasts sunflower seed meal production in May 2026-27 at 32,000 metric tons, with consumption at 180 TMT and imports at 150 TMT. Crushing activity remains limited as sunflower seed meal is mainly used by small and medium cattle farms. Post forecasts imports at 150 TMT and ending stocks at 23 TMT. Post forecasts soybean oil production in May 2026-27 at 950,000 metric tons, with total supply around 134,000 tons and ending stocks at 144,000 tons. Post projects soybean oil consumption to reach 790,000 metric tons in May 2026-27, driven by expanded crushing and blending with sunflower oil. The food subsidy program serves roughly 64 million beneficiaries with blended oil credits. Imports are forecast at 50 TMT while exports rise to 200 TMT. Sunflower seed oil production supply and demand statistics. Oil, sunflower seed 2024, 2025, 2025, 2026, 2026 to 2027. Market year begins OCT 2024, OCT 2025, OCT 2026. Egypt USDA official new post, USDA official new post, USDA official new post crush 1000 MT, 50 50 60 60 0 60 extras rate 999.999%, 0.42 0.42 0.4167 0.4167 0.4167. Beginning stocks 1000 MT, 6767 78 78068 production 1000 MT, 21 21 25 25 025. My imports 1000 MT, 450 450 450 450 0450 total supply 1000 MT, 538 538 553 553 543. My exports 1000 MT, 50 50 50 50 050 industrial dom risk cons 1000 MT, 0000000 food use dom cons 1000 MT, 410 410 435 435 0450 feed waste dom cons 1000 MT, 0000000 total dom cons 1000 MT, 410 410 435 435 0450 ending stocks 1000 MT, 78 78 68 68 043 total distribution 1000 MT, 538 538 553 553 0543 1000 MT %. Official data can be accessed at PSD Online Advanced Query. Production post forecasts Egypt's sunflower seed oil production in May 2026-27, October-September at 25 TMT, reflecting the same levels of crush activity during the previous marketing year. Consumption. Post expects Egypt's sunflower seed oil consumption to reach 450 TMT in May 2026 $27, an increase of 15 TMT from May 2025 $26. This growth is driven by more competitive prices in the domestic market as inflation gradually eases. However, Post lowers its previous consumption estimate for May 2025-26 from 650 TMT to 435 TMT, reflecting reduced imports by both public and private sectors. Recently, there has been increased preference for using more crude soybean oil, which is then refined and blended with sunflower seed oil at lower ratios. Trade Post forecasts Egypt's sunflower seed oil imports in May 2026-27 at 450 TMT, similar to the previous marketing year. Post is revising downward its trade estimate of sunflower seed oil in May 2025-26 to 450 TMT from its previous estimate of 620 TMT amid higher prices in the global market. Egyptian importers are paying particular care to the selection of crude oils available on the international markets. Both the public and private sector opt for more affordable oil prices. Between May 2020-21 and May 2025-26, Egypt's imports of sunflower seed oil amounted to 1.73 MT, with top suppliers being Russia, followed by Ukraine and the EU. See Figure 7. Figure 5. Egypt's sunflower seed imports by country stocks. Post forecasts sunflower seed oil ending stocks in May 2026-27 down at 43 TMT due to a forecasted higher consumption. Sunflower seed oil stock levels are held by both public and private sectors, with the private sector holding the majority of share. Palm oil production, supply and demand statistics. Oil palm 2024-2025, 2025-2026, 2026-2027. Market year begins OKT 2024, OKT 2025, OKT 2026. Egypt USDA official, New Post USDA official, New Post USDA official. New Post area planted 1000 HA, 0,000,000 area harvested, 1000 HA 0,000,000 trees, 1000 trees, 0,000,000. Beginning stocks 1000 MT, 105, 105, 151, 151, 0166 production 1000 MT, 0,000,000. My imports 1000 MT, 1301, 1301, 300, 300, 300 total supply 1000 MT, 1406, 406, more 51, 451, 0466. My exports 1000 MT, 550,000. Industrial domestic cons 1000 MT, 70, 70, 75, 75, 0, 75. Food use dom cons 1000 MT. 1180, 1180, 1210, 1210, 0, 1250, feed waste, dom, cons, 1000 MT, 0,000,000, total dom, cons, 1000 MT, 1250, 1250, 1285, 1285, 0, 3025, ending stocks, 1000 MT, 151, 151, 166, 166, 0, 141, total distribution, 1000 MT, 146, 146, 451, 451, 0, 466, yield, MTHA, 0,000,000, 1000 HA, 1000 trees, 1000 MT, MTHA. Official data can be accessed at PSD Online Advanced Query Production. Egypt does not commercially cultivate oil palms or produce any palm oil. Consumption post projects. Egypt's palm oil consumption up to 1.325 MMT in May 2026-27, driven by population growth and greater use of palm oil in the food processing industry. Post estimates that 94% of palm oil is used in food production, with vegetable shortenings making up 40% of that total. Shortening is widely used by restaurants, catering services, and fast food outlets. The production of vegetable ghee accounts for 50% of palm oil consumption, while margarine represents about 3%, primarily used by private bakeries and pastry shops. Trade Post forecasts Egypt's imports of palm oil in May 2025-26 at 1.3 MMT, unchanged from the previous marketing year, despite increased palm oil prices in the international market. As palm oil is an essential oil used in a variety of staple products in the food industry, fast food chains, hotels, and the processing sector, price fluctuation does not have as much of an impact in demand compared to other oils. Egypt imports palm oil from two major producing countries, Indonesia and Malaysia, see Figure 6. Most oil imported into Egypt is crude and then refined in Egypt. Stocks. Post forecast palm oil ending stocks in May 2026-27 at 141 TMT, down 19 TMT from the previous marketing year. The decrease in palm oil stocks is due to a forecasted higher consumption from the previous marketing year and a stable import volume. Carrying palm oil stock levels are mainly held by the private oil industry.